Jazzcast Pros.
Welcome to High Vibe Table Talks, the podcast to help you, the current or aspiring solopreneur, navigate the messy middle so you can make both an income and an impact. Hi, I'm Rashawn, and I love creating safe spaces for women to be courageous in their dreams. After spending a decade working in sales for a startup and talking with hundreds of other women entrepreneurs, I know it can be lonely, but you can do this. So pull up a seat. This is High Vibe Table Talks. And when I go to conferences, I did this after I got back from the podcast convention back in Denver. I did what are some of my takeaways from the conference? And this past weekend, we did the Aligned Entrepreneur Pod-a-Thon, and it was amazing. And so there were 6 podcasters who went up and did a live in studio with WXXI recording of their podcast. So I want to talk about my takeaways from my episode, as well as my takeaways from each of the other 5 podcasts, which I will encourage you to listen to each one of them. I thought my speech was really, really good. And then as I'm listening to each of them, I'm like, that was so good. Oh my God, that was so good. So each of the podcasts were incredible. So I'm going to tell you my takeaways from each of them and why you should go listen. So I was first, and I scripted everything out. I felt really good about it. I was excited. Stephanie Armstrong and I came up with some really great content. I was very excited about it. And then I was a little nervous, but I was okay, a little nervous. And then we sat down and they were like, 3, 2, 1, go. And I was like, I don't know words right now. I forgot words. I mean, not really. And even Stephanie after was like, yeah, I could tell you were a little nervous. So, but then we got in our groove and everything was great. And so something that I wish I had done differently is I kind of forgot that it was still a podcast. And so my intro wasn't super strong. My ending wasn't super strong. And I did feel like I was kind of playing more towards the audience, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it just some of the things that I have worked really hard on getting better at in actual podcasting just went right out my brain when I was there. So a takeaway is just kind of remembering that it's still a podcast, and getting more centered and more grounded beforehand would have been very beneficial. So it's something that I didn't do. And I really like the script that I had made. I do feel a lot of times when I am recording on my computer, I have notes that I can look at, and they're right up next to where my camera is, so that it doesn't look like I'm looking at my notes all the time. And I think with this one, I fell back into let me read from the piece of paper that is in front of me. So I do feel like there were more times than I would have liked of just sitting and looking at the camera or looking at Stephanie as I was asking the question versus looking down at my paper. And so having higher level notes versus a script is always better for me, and I think better for the audience and better for the listeners. And so I think remembering that too, I really like the script that I created, but I wish I had more high level stuff versus just a script. Overall, I think it went really well. People came up to me after and were like, oh my God, when you said this, I really loved it, or this was my biggest takeaway, or I can't wait. And I really feel the things you said, hit me into the excuses that I make. And so I'm ready to go back out there and sell and talk about the things that you mentioned in the talk, which that's the whole point, which was really, really cool. So right after mine was Dr. Pam, and she had a guest on there. Her name was Maisha, and they were talking about how confidence is the new power suit. And my biggest takeaways from hers were around the fact that you have to let go, and grace and forgiveness for yourself is where confidence comes from. And so you have to let go the negativity that you're holding on to and give yourself so much grace in order to create space for positive feelings, positive people, just positivity to be in your life. And when we sit and spiral and sit in like our trauma and our shame, that nothing good is going to come out of that. And her guest Maisha was talking about taking off all of your makeup, taking off all of your clothes, taking off everything, and just sitting with yourself and allowing yourself to like cry and process any sort of like emotions you have around that, to then really get super comfortable. The other thing that she said that was like, yes, girl. She was like, yeah, I'm extra. Yes, I'm bougie, but like, if I weren't doing all the things, what would I be? I would be boring. And I was not put here to be boring. And I was like, yes. Like, when people judge you for like being too much, that's a projection of them, and that's a them problem. That's not a you problem. And so really, truly sitting with yourself, all of yourself, and being so confident in yourself as that person, which I think is really powerful and something, that I want to start to incorporate. I do feel like I am a confident person, but there's still so much room for growth in that area. So I really loved that conversation so much. And with a lot of these, it was cool where it kind of felt like these two powerful women were sitting and having a conversation over like a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, and we got to like peer into it, which is really, really special. So Dr. Pam's podcast is called Grace and Grind. Our live episodes from the Pod-a-Thon aren't out yet, but as soon as they are, I will let you know. Dr. Pam's episode is definitely one that you should go listen to. And the next podcast was called The Doze with Soda Kuchikowski and Marianne, who is the host of Healing Her Within podcast. And they were talking about the importance of sleep and rest as an entrepreneur, both like the science behind it of like, here is why melatonin works, and here is why you need to reduce the amount of bright lights that you are taking in right before you go to bed, and why sunlight is really important at the beginning of the day, the middle of the day, and towards the end of the day. And that is how your body is checking in with like sleep patterns, and as your body wants to start to release these certain chemicals based on the natural information and data that it's getting. So she talked a lot about that. And also there's like 4, I think, archetypes, 4 types of people. And based on which one you are, there's like a wolf and a dolphin and a bear. She recommended this book, Start With When, which is one of the books that talks about the 4 different types. And you can take the quiz to see which one you are, and then really kind of tailor, as much as you can, tailor your sleep schedule based on what is most beneficial for you. Soda was talking about how the type that she is, she always thought working out first thing in the morning was best, but actually like for her body and for her sleep type, working out between 5 and 7 p.m. is when her body is at its highest ability to get the most out of the workout. And I think my biggest takeaway actually from that one was the 7 different types of rest. And so like, yes, you need to sleep, but you also need like creative rest and social rest. And now I'm not going to remember the other types of rest, which is exactly why you should go and not only listen to Soda and Marianne's live episode, but also like Soda's podcast in general, because she gave so many different tips on rest. And she was like, actually, I have a whole episode about melatonin, and I have a whole episode about caffeine. And it was also like confirmation for me of there are certain types of caffeine that like my body has a really hard time metabolizing. Like I can't do like cappuccinos or like espressos anymore. I used to be able to, but I can't anymore because I like get really, really high and then I like crash. And even when I drink a cup of coffee, like it takes me hours to drink it. And also I have to stop drinking coffee after 2 p.m. I used to be able to drink coffee until like when I was working, I worked at a wellness facility. I was like the supervisor of the high school area where people could come in and work out and use the pool and use the walking track. And a lot of my shifts were like 5:30 to 9 at night. And I would be drinking coffee until I walked out at 9 o'clock at night, and I would go home and get ready and go right to bed. I cannot do that anymore. I cannot drink coffee after 2 p.m. or else I will be up staring at the ceiling at midnight. And so a lot of that was really interesting, but also like there are times where I feel like I'm getting enough sleep, but I don't feel rested. And this was just kind of like a confirmation for me of like, yes, because you're not getting rest in all the different areas. Like this was something that became more clear in one of the later podcasts that I'll talk about. But it was like, just because you are sitting or sleeping doesn't necessarily mean that your brain is resting, because maybe you're sitting and thinking about a million different other things. Active rest was one of the other ones. So that's like yoga and stretching and walking. And so not like high intense physical activity, but like a way to move your body and kind of release things that are pent up in your body, but they're not like very high intensity forms of activity. And Marianne actually told a really beautiful story around a retreat that she recently went on and just how much sleep she did end up getting. And it just was really, again, confirmation that like it's something that I need to prioritize. In my fall episode a couple weeks ago, I talked about sleep being a priority for me at the moment. And I'll get into some of this a little bit later, but I want to like kind of change that and say like rest needs to be more of a priority for me at the moment, not just sleep, but true rest. I was talking about it with people at the conference, and also, just thinking about it as I was listening to these episodes of like my rest schedule right now is not ideal. And again, I'll get into a little bit of that later, but it just really kind of put a mirror up to what are you prioritizing right now, and is that the best way for you? Because when you are rested, you show up as the best version of yourself. So yeah, definitely listen to Soda and Marianne's episode with the Doze. The next one, this was a really cool moment that we had, and it was, so WXXI, which is a local public radio station here in Rochester. We did it in their studio, and they have a podcast called Connections that they put out. And so they did a connection style episode, and the guests were Ben Albert, which was really cool because I've had Ben on this podcast. I've been on Ben's podcast. I have been in rooms with Ben Albert probably 24 times at least. And we've never met in person, even though we both live in Rochester. He has a Rochester Business Connections podcast. But anything that we had done together had always been virtual. So I got to meet him in person, which was very cool. And then Jazzy T was on there as well, was with Elena, and she is a professor at the Simon Business Institute through the University of Rochester. And first of all, she was one of the most beautiful speakers. Like, as I say, she had no likes, no ums. Every thought she had was very succinct and well thought out. And I just was so captivated by the way that she speaks. So if you are listening, Elena, it was really, really beautiful to hear you speak, and just was so profound, a lot of the things that were said. So first takeaway is maybe I should get back into doing some of the speech training things that are out there, like Toastmasters or something like that, that works on your likes, your ums, and just really practicing that public speaking and taking that up a notch. The overall topic of their discussion was treating your podcast like a business and really having it as an extension of your business. And it definitely is something, Jazzy was talking about accountability, which is really important. And that's why working with her every week keeps me accountable to where's your episode? Where are your show notes? Where is this? And other people have said the same thing. Like, I had episodes of a podcast for like a year. This microphone sat on this shelf that's right above me for over a year before I took it out of the box. And here we are, over 100 episodes in. I think we've missed like 2 or 3, and so that's 2 years, and missing 2 weeks is something I never could have done by myself. Really being able to delegate was something that came up a lot. Like, if you're going to treat it like a business, then you need to do all of the things that are included in getting that out there. And so it just gave me thought of like, is there a way that I can outsource some of the marketing pieces of this? Because it's something that I tend to struggle with, put on the back burner, I would say. So it was, again, it just was like so cool to hear these people talk about things that they're an expert at when it comes to like having your podcast be an extension of your business and how to treat it like a business. And one of the other things that was cool in that conversation is like Jazzy and Ben had differing opinions. That is something that is so important, and why I love having these roundtable discussions is because Ben was like, I didn't have a big network. I just kind of created one as I was creating the podcast. And Jazzy was of the opinion that like you have to have some sort of audience before you should create your podcast, because how do you know what your ideal client wants if you don't even have an audience to pull when it comes to what your content should be about? And there was a lot of discussions around, if you're not monetizing and optimizing the podcast, then it really is more of a hobby versus like part of your business. And so kind of just that like chicken and the egg thought. And it just gave me a lot of time to reflect on how my podcast adds to the business, and could I be doing more to make them mutually beneficial for each other? So a lot to think about off of that conversation. And the next podcast episode was with Kelly Marie, who is the host of the Healthy Illness podcast. When I say it was a powerful discussion, that is an understatement. And this is what I was kind of referring to when I was talking about the rest and sleep, because Kelly and her guests really talked about having white space in your schedule and having time for you and being able to check in on yourself, and having this to-do list that of all these things that you could do for all these other people, and never taking time to sit back and think of what can I do for myself. And the one guest talked about on a daily basis, spending just like 10 minutes and sitting with yourself about what you need, both physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. What do you need? And how do you feel in all of those areas? And like, it wasn't rocket science. It wasn't like it blew my mind as far as new information, but it did a couple things. It made me reflect back on the white space I have in my life currently, which feels very non-existent, and that is something I need to figure out. And also, it was confirmation that all these other people, when you look at where they are in life, where they are in their career, where they are in business, it feels like, damn, they got their shit together. And even they struggle with these things. And so there can be shame. One of the things that I currently find myself in, especially when I want to create more white space, is I get into kind of scroll heavy into TikTok, Instagram, Reels, whatever. And that leads to this shame of like, look at all that time you just wasted. And so from that, there's a couple things. Is like, okay, everybody goes through that. Now you have this mirror up of, hey, what are you doing and how can you change it? And you're not the only one who does those things. And one story that Kelly told, which was really powerful, was like she needed to fold her laundry. And so the goal was fold laundry, but her mental health was not. It was at a point that day that she was struggling with it. And so she really wanted to just lay in bed and stay there. And so the goal was to fold laundry. The goal wasn't to get out of bed, take a shower, wash your face, put on an outfit. The goal was to fold the laundry. So she brought her laundry basket into bed, dumped out the clothes right next to her, and she was able to lay in bed while she folded laundry. And kind of thinking about that good, better, best, like, was that the best? Like, if she could have said, like, oh, I'm going to snap my fingers and I'm going to have the best outcome of today. No, but it was small wins. It accomplished that goal and still, like, cared for and supported her mental health for that day. And I think that sometimes we don't take time to, like, find those small wins and say, what is the actual goal that can help and support me today? And it just was, it was like 3 high capacity, very intelligent, strong, just incredible women on the stage that just, it blew me away. It was so good. And so I will definitely share that episode as well because it is a must listen. And the last one was Elevating Enterprise with Jazzy T, her husband Ruben, and they had Matthew Burrell, who is the local Monroe County executive when it comes to, like, MWBE. So I am MWBE certified business, and so that's minority or women owned business. And he had such a great conversation of, like, okay, what does it take to get that certification, which in Monroe County is not difficult. It's kind of saying, are you who you say you are? And I mean, I think it took me like 3 hours to do my application on a Wednesday, and I had my certificate by Friday. And so it's not a lengthy process at all. Matthew makes it very easy. But then what do you do with it? And a lot of people think that those certifications and RFPs, requests for proposal, are mostly in the construction space. And so if you don't have a business that supports the construction business, then why even look at that? And so it was really interesting to hear all the different ways of, businesses that do win RFPs and how to, like, break it up. And so if it's $100 million contract, but you can do dollars worth of work for them, like, join in with other businesses to try to fill in the gaps of what you can't do so that you can focus on what your strengths are, and how much of those business is won based on relationships. And so it just was, again, nothing that, like, of course, business is built on relationships. Like, that is not groundbreaking, but it was a really good reminder of how are you nurturing relationships to create more business today. And so I'm excited to reach out to Matthew, and he gave a couple other places like the Apex Accelerator, which I'm going to reach out to and just figure out, how can I take the certification that I do have, and how can I blend that with things that the county may need? Overall, it was absolutely wonderful. It was such a great day. I highly recommend listening to all of the episodes as soon as they are out. I will definitely share them. But yeah, those are my takeaways from my podcast and all the others at the Pod-a-Thon. And remember that big dreams and small steps will transform your life.